trying to specifically look independent of corporate influences. A blogger is typing furiously. He or she is sipping briskly from an 8-ounce can of lightly carbonated energy drink in an effort to stay awake just for a few more minutes to complete work on their newly discovered but soon-to-be mega controversy of the day. Glenn Beck thinks he's George Washington. He has a Washington complex. He's actually named his book Being George Washington. His ego's out of control. He must be threatening to start a revolution. I knew the Tea Party had to be dangerous. The news of my self-elevation to national fatherhood will likely spread from blog to blog, then to news sources and pundits, all of whom will be more than happy to spread the news that Glenn Beck's messianic complex can no longer be contained. None of them, of course, will take the time to realize the irony of the situation, that they are literally judging a book by its cover. So what's the truth? Simple. I do believe I'm George Washington, but I believe that you are as well. I don't believe this because I have an extraordinarily high opinion of myself. I believe it because I have a real understanding of who George Washington was. Contrary to popular belief, George Washington was not born a 555-foot, 5-inch monument. He was never a painting or a statue in a city. He was a man, albeit one who happened to see his principles as immovable objects rather than minor inconveniences. That is what's truly inspiring about George Washington. He was a human, a capeless superhero. He faced many of the same challenges in life that we all face. Yes, he was given the responsibility to deal with historic challenges on a scope that is difficult for us to imagine today. But the reason he was given the enormous responsibilities is that people admired how he handled the small ones. He lived his life in a way that impressed and inspired others. So when the most trying times arrived, they all looked to him. Over and over again, he was willing to sacrifice his own happiness for the good of others. George Washington wound up at the top of every insurmountable mountain he came to, because he never acknowledged that there was an insurmountable mountain in front of him. Sure, he knew the enormity of what he was facing, but he saw each decision as just another step, and he used his principles and his faith. Yes, sorry, critics. The man clearly believed God's hand was guiding him in America. He used that faith to constantly maintain sure footing. The Washington Monument really does tell his story, albeit unintentionally, as it towers above Washington, D.C. From a distance, it's a perfect structure. It owns the skyline. It's bigger than life itself in a city filled with people who think they're bigger than life itself. But as you walk up to the structure and view it up close, you can't help but notice all of the imperfections. In 1854, work on the project ground to a halt, and there was simply no more money left for the monument. Yes, I know, amazing as it seems, the government actually used to stop projects when they couldn't fund them. Anyway, when construction began again, the quarry that provided the stone for the first half of the monument could no longer be used because it had been exhausted building bunkers for the war. Today, if you stand close enough to the monument, you'll notice that it's two-toned. The marble granite stone used for the lower half is clearly a lighter or whiter shade than that that's used at the top. It is the monument that life and war got in the way of. But those imperfections serve as a perfect tribute to George Washington. He was that monument. From the distance of hundreds of years, he appears superhuman, able to soar heights that you and I cannot. In reality, however, his life was a series of challenges handled with honor, firmness, and faith, brick by brick. Many times he succeeded in facing those challenges, but sometimes he did not. Slavery is one frequently cited example. Yes, it is true, George Washington owned slaves. You can make all kinds of excuses for it. It was the norm at the time. He strongly advocated for the practice to be abolished. He treated his slaves well. He freed them upon his wife's death, etc., etc., etc. But it's one thing you cannot ignore. It is a flaw, an imperfection, a part of his life that, if he were around today, I'm sure he would regret.